with absolute power, therefore absolutely corrupting an entire global superpower. They now got a lot of attitude, and I'm not feeling it, but it doesn't matter, because at this point, God is the one that ought to be disquieted by this enough to do something about it, given that really and truly, as one meager mortal sitting in a generally disregarded country across the world, I stand no chance at all against that beast, that monstrous gargantuan called America. I have no shot. But like the Bible says, if God be for us, who can be against us? So hallelujah, right? We pride ourselves, at least boastfully, in the fact that Jesus Christ is God. He is the God of the universe. He has created this joint, and so nothing in it gets away with murder, especially against those whom he has set apart to be his people for his own possession. He knows that like a horizontal asymptote, we're going to start getting violently outnumbered by the majority of an Earth citizenship that is losing their bonkers. They've gone bonkers, they're rockers, they're losing their minds. And so because they're losing their minds, where shall I find my protection so asymptotal as I on this x-axis? I am so violently outnumbered. Morality is flying out the window. Ration, reason, and sense is nowhere to be found. And entire societies are acting like ancient Rome and ancient Babylon. Or perhaps South Africa. I'll tell you about South Africa. You know what they're like? They're like that ancient civilization in the movie Apocalypto. Have you seen Apocalypto? You will throw yourself out of window if at all you've seen that movie without realizing that we've come a long way as the human race. It represents the kinds of societies that used to exist in the movie back in the day. Apocalypto. There is this ancient civilization that is thoroughly worshipping some sun, moon, god thing. And in order to appease this god, they've got to chop off the heads of foreigners, right? So people that don't belong to this particular country, and then roll them down some steep staircase while the civilians on the ground are ululating as people's heads get chopped off. Ululating. I don't know. Does anything look like that to you? Like in 2023, can you scratch your head and wonder, ooh, where can I find that? I know Islamic Jihad. Heads rolling down a staircase with students in London, students in New York City, students at Harvard, like proper, just being like pro-Palestine. This is what's going on. Wow. Okay, while in my country, human sacrifice is a real big baddie. Okay, people rolling down dead heads, a steep hill with everybody ululating, celebrating this bloodshed because they're thirsty for blood, because some people's lives are cheap. Witchcraft is through the roof, and you can find yourself in a position where you're now the human sacrifice C, and upon being the human sacrifice C, there is nothing you can do when you are amidst a people that are drunk with bloodthirst and a demon. All you can do is make like the lead character in Apocalypto and hope that they set you free to run into the wilderness and see if you can avoid a dart. That's what's good. Run in squiggly mode, run in a zigzag, and escape to go and save your wife who's giving birth to a second child in a well. Cause you're rational. I live in that kind of land, and like that lead character in Apocalypto, I'm trying to escape. But that land of mine that's ululating at the random carnage of heads of people that didn't have it coming, they are having Americans just recognize this, incendiary agenda of Africans and then salivate after abandoned Africans living in a barbaric land. That's chopping people's heads off and ululating as they roll down a steep staircase. And these barbaric Americans hoping to capitalize on this in a slave trade are not even so much American leadership as they are American civilians. So here it is that this thing has trickled down. I've got like a whole civilian set free out of prison, wreaking havoc in my life, trying to buy me real quick from a country that rolls heads down a steep staircase, much like Islam. So of course then in that regard you can gauge thoroughly that South Africa's pro-Palestine. It's standing with Hamas. No surprise over there. People rolling chopped off heads down steep staircases. South Africa does it. It's been doing it for a minute. So of course it's gonna stand with people that can even chop off, never mind adult heads, but those of babies. Very well. Now that you have gauged that as an ecosystem, trust, therefore, that upon God saying that in the last days, people will be eating, marrying, being given in marriage, being drunk and getting merry. Of course, I added my own paraphrase over there. That there will be such practices happening, and yet people will prosper nonetheless to get married on the same day they rolled ahead down a steep staircase. So do not look at all of this marrying and being given in marriage, or this normal living that you are observing in certain parts of the planet. Do not crease your forehead at it, because it is literally done in a climate or an era of understanding of all other carnage happening around, but nonetheless disinterested in being human about the human, or human about the human condition, because they thoroughly imagine that they're the exempt human from this carnage, given that they're a Roman citizen as opposed to a gladiator that was kidnapped from some neighboring country and made to fight in a colosseum. I am unfortunately gazed upon by my own land like I'm a gladiator. How did that even happen? I am now a second-class citizen, and being at least a second-class citizen, I'm subjugated to the tyranny of my country's insensitivity against me and human sacrifice rituals, servicing their idol gods while I grieve within. Thankfully, however, I have a holy God that has warned me in advance that these things would happen across nations, but you're not caught unawares when the Son of Man returns. Why? Because you will be making the right observations about what's going on, and so therefore reaching the right inferences when this activity rises up in increasing measure, and so your reaction is to look up and lift up your head, for your redemption draweth nigh. Everybody else, however, will be like the people in the days of Noah, marrying, being given in marriage, drinking, and being merry. That's what's good. So, America, yeah. You are ridiculous as you are. Nonetheless, you will do a better thing. Because the way that you are so violently afflicting people on this asymptote, people on this horizontal asymptote, tapering to infinity zero, tending towards zero, vastly outnumbered human beings on the earth called Christians, getting increasingly outnumbered, to the celebration of a global citizenship, glad that Christianity is on the decline. Yeah, while you're busy doing all that, you are going to afflict so many non-Christians and so many Christians alike that ultimately favor is going to tip against you and your barbarian activity. You're going to be disincentivized from continuing. You're going to basically come up with new laws to be less insane. Much like coming up with boxing, since you can't satiate the thirst or the bloodthirst or the hunger of people that like to see people passing away for sport. Alternatives to such a thing as that, like boxing. You're gonna come up with an alternative to an arena where people actually die. With one where, no, people don't die this time around, they just get bruises. You're gonna come up with a lighter version of censorship. You're gonna come up with a lighter version of afflicting people with shadow banning, etc. You're gonna calm down. You're gonna scale back. You're not gonna do 100% better, because who is busy watching a boxing match anymore? If they're moral, that's what's good. Boxing is still ridiculous, but it literally is derived from people's continued passion and hunger and thirst for seeing other human beings hurt each other when it's absolutely unnecessary. Human beings lightened the load on gladiators fighting unto death in the Colosseum, on the world's conscience, by coming up with a diet version of it. A diet version of it. So you're going to come up with a diet version of persecuting Christians, because you're going to lose so much popularity, America, that you're going to stop doing a strange, anomalous thing against people who have not had it coming. I am now going to explain to you why, America, I say that you're going to come up with diet abuse versus just flat out flagrant hard knock abuse. Okay, yeah, it's because what you've been doing, you've been at it for a minute, and I'm not your first victim, but I'm among your last. I thank God, thank the amazing Lord on high. Just so happen to be among the last batch of slaves under your insanity. Well, how can I describe myself? It's like, think indeed about slavery. Being born to a slave mom and a slave dad, and when you turn like 13, they then abolish slavery. So literally by the skin of your teeth, you escaped a lifetime of sorrow, but not before first being a child laborer. That's who I am. I was made the slave of a system that was at its tail end, but I experienced enough of it to basically just be an activist against this rubbish. And the reason why I can even afford to be an activist against it is because there have been other people before me and other structures before me that have been so violently made to bleed, exsanguinated, essentially, by the American pomp and the American arrogance that they laid the groundwork for me to ultimately be at the very top of a screaming voice, as opposed to at the very beginning of it leaving the vocal cords. I am not inaudible. I am seriously regarded at this present moment for what I am saying, because the issue is that bad. Underestimation is irresponsible where I am concerned, because the issues I am raising are thoroughly and comprehensively a thorn in America's flesh. And just as the messenger of Satan that it was in the body of Paul, you must understand that the Lord is gonna keep it there, keep it there, keep it there, until a work is done. I am not the first ever activist of this nature. The fact that I've even been made an activist at all is an abomination to me, because I just wanted to be bare and pregnant, for crying out loud, having something like 10 children with some dude I am married to. But I'm doing these things at 39. That's what's good, because one of your men went and dissed my big forehead. Let's talk. Okay, I have a sister, an older sister, but first let's talk about a mother. I have a mother, an older mother, because aren't all mothers older? That has been experienced through a tyrannical violence at the hands of an American boss. Wait for it, in South Africa. Like, the audacity, like you're in my country, you're hanging out in my backyard, goodness gracious, you're stroking my cat, and then you give me grief, but she got away with it. Some women my mother was working for some time ago. Do you know that I ended up, guys, you know what, like, we gotta talk. I ended up suffering like no man's business as a teenager growing up. My older sister was studying abroad, so she never got to experience all of these hard knock lives for us. Instead, treated, we get, yeah, because my sister was a genius, okay? And so she went to study in Italy early, and then ultimately university in America. So all of the like strivings of my mom, I got to experience all by my lonesome before even my little sister was conceived, born, before my mom even met the baby daddy, that would be the dad of my younger sister. There was a time when we had to move out. We had lived all throughout, not all throughout, but pretty much from the time I was about 11, 12, maybe 10, up until I was like maybe 16, 15, 16. Yeah, we had lived in the suburbs because my mother managed to get a degree, get a better job, get better working conditions, and so therefore buy houses and stuff. And so we were able to, you know, take our bags out of the hood and move to the burbs. Yeah, that's what's good. Remember the other day I was telling you that when I was in high school I had one friend that was super duper ghetto, and the only one I do like was Soweto. The rest of us were snobs, but she used to date these ghetto guys and we didn't understand why she doesn't follow the footsteps of her snobbish friends. Yeah. Later on in that story I then also spoke about how it is that there was a time when I was in about university, I ended up having to, for several years, somewhere along the way, moving back to Soweto because my mom ultimately gained her footing again, but not before losing it. Guess who made my mom lose her footing? This here rodeo is not the first time for us. Ingati mina, I am suffering from generational curses. It happened to my mom too. It happened to my mother too. This dry patch where you don't know what to do. Only difference with my mom is that she had children. And that's the sad and uncomfortable thing. And when you are as poor as I am, as Karabo right now, with like 2 kids, with like 3 kids, it's like, yo, you gonna hustle, you gonna make it work, you gonna do things you would much rather do as a woman, just so you can have a roof over your head and food in your children's stomachs. So we praise the Lord Jesus Christ on high right now, that I, as Cranberry K, gave my life to Jesus Christ first and foremost, so I am protected under provision. And secondly, because I am in Christ, I don't fornicate, I'm not out here having babies out of wedlock, and so I'm not having to carry around 7-year-old children, 5-year-old children, yeah, when I have nowhere to live. Living or living in the back of a house of your older sister, because you've had to lose the first ever house that you bought, that you built off plan. You built it off plan. Like, that's what you must understand. So every last corner square of that house was from your own mind. The architect, when he was drawing his plans, you were like, I want the bathroom there. No, actually move it there. I want the kitchen there. Yeah. A house that was born out of your own desire. And the first one you ever bought, and you lose it because of a nasty boss. And guess what? She was American. Listen, America, you've been destroying, you've been messing stuff up, and I'm going to put you in your place. Mamela. When I was a teenager, there was a time when we had to live at my aunt's, so we had to downgrade violently, okay, from a house that my mom had bought. She had bought it in Winchester Hills. It was beautiful. We had this massive yard. It was huge. And my mom planned on extending on it. It was a 3-bedroom, and it was in the center of this gargantuan yard that my mom wanted to put paving in. She wanted to put a swimming pool in. She wanted to extend it, maybe even make it a double-story, like, plans. That would have been the home that now today I like would be go high. My mom had planned to sit there a lot and keep it in that place. That neighborhood today is still very beautiful. The prices have gone up. They built a garage around it. Like, it was a massive loss. Yeah. I was living there at the latter part of my primary school and the first maybe 2 years of high school. And then my mom lost it. Yeah. Type establishment thing. She experienced, challenges in her company where she was working. They started to retrench. Yeah. Liberty Life, where she was working. They started to retrench, blah, blah, blah. And my mother was facing job loss, and they were cutting salaries. They were doing funny little strange stuff. So we ended up forcibly having to move out of that place. One of my cousins took it over, and living in some squeezed up, like all that furniture, we had to squeeze it in this like townhouse that was not very far from it was still in the, not neighborhood, but it was Ridgeway. It was in Ridgeway. You wouldn't even understand what that means if you're not from South Africa, but it was still more or less in the same neighborhood. It was still the south of Johannesburg, but we moved away from Winchester Hills to Ridgeway in a squeezy little joint. I thought that was like a temporary thing, that we were going to move back a proper house that is a standalone, but it would only be downhill from there. So my mother found herself in a sorrowful position, pretty much like what it is that would have been the loss of my job at MTN. You lose a job, and then you end up hustling just to pay rent and taking a lesser job that pays you less, blah, blah, doing all these things. So you live in a small little squeezy space, and your children are still hopeful that you're going to be okay. And because you want to be recovered to where you used to be, because you want to go back to where you used to be, yeah, now you start settling, you start compromising. And this is when my mother was phone called by a former colleague that she used to work with at Liberty Life, offering her a position within her field in her new business that she was starting. And this woman was American. My mom was struggling and striving with us moving from house to house, musical chairs. I remember when I was in high school, one of my girls would always come to me every year that I knew in primary school and ask me, so Grandma, where are you living this year? Because we used to move at least once a year. From one house to the other, because my mom was never satisfied ever since moving out of that place in Winchester. Plus, she was always trying to find a bargain, a cheaper place, etc. It was just moved, but it was all in the suburbs. Throughout my teenage years, it was all in the suburbs, right? We never ended up being so derailed to a point where now we are living Kosoweto in a room, squeezed up, etc. It never got there until like second year varsity. And that's when the lowest of the low had been reached, and how we got there was because of this American woman. Y'all need to understand, America, you have ruined. You have a thing about scouting talent. You have a thing about seeing glory in a person. You have a thing about that. However, you also have a thing about exploiting that. You're like a slave master. You want to take a person on board but not pay them. Or you want to take a person on board and then expect them to take all of your rubbish lying down. And then when they don't want to take it, they get out without having anything else. And that's when now the children are sleeping on a sponge on the floor. Let's go on right ahead to keep on telling the story. So we moved from pillar to post with my mom taking lesser and lesser jobs, working for random people that it was never anything at all ever what she had when she was at Liberty Life. Things were just falling apart everywhere. Falling apart. But she was still able to have enough of a job and enough of a salary to keep us at least in a house. Me, in a house with its own bedroom and everything. And it helped that my sister was overseas, so she didn't need a 3-bed. She did not need, we didn't have to share where we would be fighting and what have you. That is the ecosystem. Then I get to like first year, and pretty much end of 2003, beginning of 2004, and that's when things like became really shaky, where this woman, I get my mom was moving like musical chairs from home to home, and also mini company to mini company, just trying to make ends meet. This woman then, upon starting her own business, remembers the colleague that she used to work with at Liberty Life, and knows that she's struggling, and it's like, hey, and she's like, hey lady, do you want to come work for me? I'm starting a little thing something. I have got a sponsorship from the US to proliferate a branch of this nature in South Africa. We needed to grow, and I want somebody I trust in my environment working for me. So I've seen how you work, where it is that you were at Liberty Life. Really, please come on board. And initially she was so happy. Initially she was excited because she'd been struggling, right? She'd been struggling ever since Liberty Life retrenched, and downside it was just a mess ever since then. And she went and was like, oh yay. This woman was earning dollars. She started something that was American in nature, but despite this being an American company trying to do a thing in South Africa, this woman exploited the cheap labor in South Africa. So while she was earning these dollars, she made sure that the salary of my mother was not even market related to her professional skills and experiences and expertise. Scraps, like just she headhunted my mother from where she was at, promising her big things. We're gonna grow, and when you grow, you're gonna move to this level, and together we're gonna go in the sunset. And so she barely raised her salary from the last place she was at. She was seeking stability, and she thought this was a good opportunity. But an American woman, remembered who was the best HR person in the room. Who was the best? Yeah, I remember her. I know that currently she's struggling because they retrenched in the company. And a lot of the people that were working with me at the time were all just scattered. They were scattered all over Johannesburg, getting new jobs, making a decision to do this and that, blah, blah, etc. And there's one in particular that stood out for me. And so given the level of desperation that all of these people are in right now, this is the perfect opportunity for me to get cheap labor, to start my own little thing and basically pocket funds, keep money for myself, not properly pay them, but make them work like dogs. Yeah, something of that nature. So this woman poaches my mom from where she was at. My mom then works for her, and this is now in first year varsity for me. Poaches her, and my mom's working there, and within the first 2-3 months, my mother has nowhere to go. She is struggling. Do you understand? The abuse. If I tell you the abuse, every day she would come home and she would cry and complain. She would be on the phone with some friend on some hebatung. This woman did that to me. I did a report, and she threw the papers on the ground saying that it's rubbish. She was so abusive of my mom. Like, she was initially a colleague on the same level with my mother, with Liberty Life. Now she was her boss. And now that she was elevated above her and had poached her out of a situation that was already kind of unstable, she basically gained absolute power over my mother. And so got corrupted absolutely. And treated her so horribly on the job. Treated her so badly as a boss that my mother wrote that out for something like a year. But it was so unbearable. She kept on looking for jobs, trying to move, and she couldn't. Nobody was hiring, nobody was moving her over, nobody was giving her what she needed, that she ended up quitting her job without another one. It's called constructive dismissal, when your boss makes your life a living nightmare so badly that you end up quitting. If it was the Daystar CCMA, which back then it wasn't, she would have won that case. Anyway, whatever. This woman constructively dismissed my mom. She was a nightmarish boss. She was from hell. And she treated my mother like a second-grade citizen. Underpaid her. Recognized what she could gain. The thing that I am currently lamenting against where Americans are concerned is they make an observation of the skill of Africans, the intelligence, the hard work. They make an observation of their glory. And instead of rightly compensating it, a lot of them look into the situation in a very exploitative fashion, in an opportunistic fashion. That's always been the uncomfortable sorrow of a people that are viable, highly glorious, but yet to advance, yet to reach a certain place. They find themselves as slaves. It's like what happened with colonization. Englishman goes from Europe, comes to Africa, sees all of this raw talent, this virgin glory, and instead of rightly compensating it and working with it in partnership, it lorded its iron fist on it and took it for slaves. And the reason why they did that, I covered this some time ago, and not time ago, yesterday or day before, when I was busy talking about these people complaining about colonization and how it is that they must get rid of the colonizer. But I was like, goodness, they brought the gospel, so please don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. That video, if you watched it, you will gain the bigger explanation that I gave in it. But like the whole notion that I am currently making that is separate from that day's content is that Europe was powerful. I made mention of this in that very video, that Europe was powerful. And when a nation is powerful, it gets corrupted. When people are living in opulence, when they're living in wealth, when they have arrived and have gotten big, they suddenly just develop a tyrannical thing in them. Something inside them makes them oppressive. They tyrannize a smaller people. They feel entitled to respect, honor. They feel entitled to servitude by other people. Feeling of entitlement is emboldened by their strength above them. So essentially, there are people who abuse their power. They are powerful and in a position to crush a person underneath their thumb, right? Underneath their fist. They're in a position to crush them. But what is the noble thing to do is be like God, who has power to crush the earth and take it to hell, but he doesn't. He rather awards us with grace. And the Lord expects of the human race to be like him, to be slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, and when you are mighty above a people, to love them and train them and create opportunities for them, but not lord it over them abusively with an iron fist. But the human race has fallen. Our hearts are deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. We are born dead in trespasses and sins, and in sins did our parents conceive us. So whenever a people gain power, they become oppressive, and it has been like that inevitably across history. They are fat with bread. Indeed, in the book of in Revelation, when the Lord describes Babylon, he says that you are filled with much wine. And so all you can do is oppress. All you can do is sin, because there's ease in your bones and not much striving. You can afford, therefore, to come up with dumb laws. That's why America has got purge laws. That's why America can afford to proliferate the colorful agenda so much. That's why they can afford to focus in their policies such worthless things, because they are filled with wine. They are filled with bread. They don't lack much. And so for those reasons, they can afford to focus an entire agenda of a government on giving rights to people who want to marry the same sex. They can focus on that. They can afford to. He described, he didn't describe Babylon that way, but Sodom. He spoke about Sodom as being filled with wine. When people don't have strivings, they suddenly lust after sin. And so that is what happened in the US. They gained power, and instead of using it responsibly, just like all other empires that have come before it that had power, they inevitably tyrannized a people group. They oppressed a people group. They can't help it. Like, they cannot help it. Humanity cannot help but do this thing. It cannot help it. No matter how much of a democracy you want to call yourself, no matter how much of a human rights advocate you might want to call yourself as a country, if you've got power because you are fallen as a human being and you are sinful as people, you will inevitably tyrannize people. America is turning its own back on its own human rights, and it's disregarding its own constitution because it's gotten to a point where it's so powerful that it can afford totalitarian. That's just human beings for you right there. That's humanity for you inevitably right there. Countries you imagined you could trust end up being entirely oppressive to people that ran to them for justice, ran to them for asylum, and then they lorded over them with a gavel, making it near on impossible for them to breathe. So that's what the US is currently doing. They thought they'd never get here, but they're there. They're there to a point where their president, during the, virus season and the, proclamations concerning taking the vaccination on the rooftops, whenever people were like, I don't want to do it, their own president, whenever these people were quoting their own constitutional freedom to their bodies, rights to their own bodies, and so therefore unprepared to take the intervention, for this particular virus that was doing its rounds all over the show. The president was like, don't come tell me about human rights. Like when a whole free country starts to speak like that, it's like skating on thin ice. You are becoming Hitler very gradually, perniciously, like stealthily, slowly but surely. You're gonna become totalitarian, and it's inevitably happening. The censorship on social media is barbaric. It is bizarre. The lack of freedoms of expression on earth right now are barbaric and bizarre. And the only reason why they can afford to do this is because they've gained a monopoly on information. They have gained a monopoly on data because of owning the world's pretty much information vessels, portals, to send information out from one country to another. And with this power having flourished in their land, because God bless them for being godly, they have gone on right ahead to lord it over as with an iron fist over mankind. The very things that they sat down together, putting their heads together in whole caucuses to strategize as to how to make a free society happy. The very same things that they did in coming together to achieve that, they are now standing vehemently against in the name of security, in the name of be it national or global security. And so now we are dealing with the preparedness to impoverish certain people in the world insofar as they've got a different opinion from what it is that they are saying. Last time I checked, that was totalitarian, but I don't gotta tell most people twice about this because there's enough people lamenting about this on earth. But no matter how big they get, no matter how giant these voices of complaint might be, the powers that are these nations are still making a decision to disregard them. So it's like complaining does nothing, meaning that we have gotten to a point where the world is essentially coming to a blistering end. From what the Lord has shown me, before even that happens, this global superpower that is America, that is frankly standing in the way of the one world government, is going to eventually capitulate all in the spirit of maintaining its power. Because whenever an empire is about to lose its power, it starts to become more humble. The thing that makes people pompous and arrogant, that therefore corrupts them absolutely, is power. And when power gets taken away from you, however marginally the amount of power might be that exits the room, you will be ever so marginally in and of yourself humble. So like I said, America is going to pretty much produce the tantamount of demoting their cataclysmic global strategies from gladiators fighting each other in the Colosseum to this is too barbaric, so let's just come up with a sport that is boxing. It will not 100% repent as a country from the tyranny of causing people to fight each other for sports, but they will come up with a light version of it, all in the name of keeping their power, because no empire falls without a fight. No empire falls without a fight. And how you know a country is about to lose is when something that it stood for very effervescently for a season, because they imagined they were too powerful to ever be knocked out the way, when they start to make concessions on it, because now they're starting to display signs of desperation. And America's going to get there. I have described them before as I've used an analogy before, where I compared them to a company was growing on its own because the product was that in demand. But then once competitors came on board and started to saturate the market, now all of a sudden they are begging customers for service. Like a company that is growing so well that it can afford to disrespect some customers and not even invest in proper training for the call center staff, because if one person leaves for some other company, who cares? When something is holding a monopoly, they tend to not be incentivized to change until somebody provides an alternative. And when that alternative comes in the door, now all of a sudden you're manning a whole call center, you're coming up with an operations strategy, you're hiring a very expensive resource to be the operations executive, that they might be able to fight fires of angry customers. And so therefore salvage that customer, because now every customer counts. But initially you were arrogant because your product was so growing. It was growing so violently, like a wildfire spreading, unfettered, with no competition. But now you can't afford to be arrogant anymore. And so therefore you are going to finally listen to some people, even some of the lowliest. And America's going to get there with all of its social media. It's going to get there, where just to salvage themselves even slightly, just to give themselves any kind of bolstering, a boosting, they're gonna do better. But not first before becoming so pompous and so arrogant so as to think that nobody will ever do anything against them, because for so long they've gotten away with so much murder, given that they've been positively reinforced to continue with wicked behavior. They will wake up one day suddenly in a shock, in a trance, that, my goodness, I did not even realize that I was bleeding out. I was like a porous bucket that when you pour water into it, water comes out at the bottom. I did not realize I was leaking. And so I guess I need to start patching this thing up. And so they will give people like me their YouTube channels back. They will give people like me, who are as violently shadow banned as we are, our channels back. Not, however, leaving us alone to be indefinitely, because like I said, they're going to come up with an alternative for bloodthirst. They're going to come up with boxing because it's a light-hearted version that does not result in carnage. It does not result in death to gladiators fighting in the Colosseum unto death. They're going to come up with the lightest strategy to afflict content creators because they're going to bleed out. Their bucket is going to bleed. And the thing that's going to make them bleed, very fortunately for the world at large, are their crazy citizens. The government is not going to be able to keep their crazy citizens in place. Their purge laws are causing more evil on the ground. Like, they imagined that by loosening the rules a little bit and bending them a little bit and giving people leg room, that they would be now more tranquil and feel less stymied by what would be the tantamount or the equivalent of a hard knock corset around a woman's body, and so she can barely breathe. They think they've just, loosened the strings behind the corset, and so people are breathing better, coming up with these purge laws by releasing prisoners from prison, by calling things like attempted murder a misdemeanor, for crying out loud, by creating a ceiling how much a person can, what value of products can be stolen off an FMCG shelf, up to what value can be stolen without a person facing a criminal apprehension, without a person facing apprehension by the police. And that figure, I believe in California, is sitting at like or is it Michigan or Chicago? It's sitting on like $900 and something. So if it's just under $1,000, a person can steal and get away with it. And I mean, $1,000 is a lot in South Africa. It's quite a bit. In my particular, my goodness, I said it was 1,800 rand earlier. I'm mistaken. I'm sorry. In those first parts where I was talking, it's not, because it's literally times 18. It is literally times 18. $100 is what's 1,800 rand. So $1,000 is what, 18,000. Oh, it's literally like a proper, like, am I missing my noodles? Never mind it buying you groceries for 1 month for a person living by yourself, but it can pay rent for some people for like a good 6 months. That's what $1,000 can do for you in South Africa. It's a violent amount of money given our terrible dollar-rand exchange rate. So I was mistaken back there. I was mistaken. I said that it was 1,800 rands because I was thinking $10, but $1,000 it blows up in rand terms. It's like near on 20 grand, guys. Like easily, it's almost 20,000 rands. People can get away with theft up to just under 20,000 rands. Imagine that being a law in South Africa. Can you imagine where these criminals would go? They wouldn't even look at macro, Joe. Forget macro. They would go to furniture stores. They would go to car dealerships that have got second-hand old-school vehicles that are under 20,000 rands. Like, you know how an old-school Beetle you can get it for like 12, 13, 15,000 rands. They would go and take cars like those. They would go into electronics stores. They would grab a small Apple laptop would easily be taken out of the ice store, go Clearwater. They could grab the first entry, like not an entry level, but they could grab an iPhone, right? Because the last time I checked, the new iPhone is it was like 30. Well, the iPhone 14 was sitting on like 14,000 rands, right? If at all you're gonna buy it cash. So they would be able to grab an iPhone 14. They would be able to grab a MacBook Pro, maybe one of the lower end ones. Just basically gauging at 20 grand and less, guys. 20 grand and less. They would be able to get out of with flat screen smart TVs, 2 of them, and put them in their houses, and the police cannot apprehend them. That's what it is that's going on in America right now. So when you are manufacturing such purge laws, thinking that you are loosening a corset on the body of a woman, tantamount, equivalent, of course it's a metaphor. When you think you're loosening the corset, making people feel less restricted, stymied, blaming it on the fact that their lives are already so hard. And so really and truly, we can't just be sending them to prison for what you imagine are misdemeanors. Instead of these people and just walking into a grocery store to grab one loaf of bread because they're hungry today and getting out, they are shopping up to just under $1,000 and then getting out. And it's more of them. It has created criminals out of people that weren't criminals. That's why they call them purge laws. It has created criminals, people that would have starved instead of steal, now are stealing because they know they can get away with it. They were disincentivized. They were negatively reinforced from stealing by the prospect of prison. But now they've been positively reinforced to steal by the promise of getting away with it. And so you create more criminals. So that particular purge law in America, in that particular state, I believe it's Michigan or Chicago, one of the two, that purge law, even the purge law of releasing prisoners from prison that have got a criminal record as heavy as attempted murder. We're not dealing with a misdemeanor or petty theft, but attempted murder. People who had committed attempts, so they nearly killed human beings, were set free in California in 2019/20, whatever. During that time when COVID was doing a thing, it was spreading, and they had to set some prisoners free, and for the sake of, I guess, security, health, security concerns, social distancing, all that jazz. They set prisoners free, and instead of combing the prisons for people who stole a radio, so maybe this guy can be safe in society out there, they set people free who could literally drive a knife into a person 10 times. But the only difference between their prison term and one who actually is serving life, or even, facing whatever, is getting a life without possibility of a parole, is the fact that the person that they stabbed did not die. They did not die, they survived. But you still stabbed them 5 times. There are people who get stabbed once and die. So you got lucky, whatever that word even means, because your victim did not die, and America ended up just setting you free because attempted murder is nothing at all. Next time that person is going to go out of prison and finish what it is that he started, what murder it is that he was not able to commit, he's going to finish it this time. My particular abuser committed attempted murder and was set free thanks to COVID laws that were rocked up, that are purge laws, and he is finishing what he wasn't able to finish. He's trying to kill me. So he's always been a killer. That man survived that he stabbed a couple of times in a way that I am struggling to survive. So what I'm trying to explain right now about what's going on in America is that its own civilians have been positively reinforced into being more and more evil by purge laws, by creating such a lawless society that even the man or the woman that would have done everything in their power to at least avoid prison is now not even scared of prison, because they have the goalpost to get to prison, they've pushed it farther out. They have created legalities and certain illegalities, and so given leg room, what you imagine to be the loosening of a corset, to people that would not have crossed a certain border if you had not opened that border. There are people committing crimes in the US right now that never would have committed those crimes if the purge laws were not concocted. So they created a civilian population of barbarians. They created a citizen population of barbarians, and these barbarians, unfortunately, are living in an era of the internet, globalization, cross-communication across multiple countries, where they're talking with people in Asia, Africa, South America, all over the show, Australia, and they are committing their abominable moral character issue lawlessnesses against those people living in those countries who don't have those kinds of purge laws. Like I said, in South Africa, we have our problems. We've got a whole bunch of witchcraft happening in these streets, with human sacrifices being committed literally every single day. You would never see Cyril Ramaphosa in his right mind signing into law, or any of the municipal councillors, any of the premiers of provinces signing into the laws of their own provinces, allowance for thieves to steal up to 1,800 rands or 18,000 rands. You will never see that happening, where they will allow prisoners to, or where they will set free attempted murder. That didn't happen in South Africa. The freeing of prisoners didn't happen during COVID, because the country has got such a bad case with crime, and already our prisons don't have enough of them in there, because a lot of them are in the streets. So they much rather took whatever it is that they took in their stride during COVID rather than set them free. So the purge laws in the US are an anomaly and a shock to everybody else in the world. We're like, we're watching and we're like shocked, out of our minds, we're shocked. And so even though we've got our own problems, like I said, witchcraft is a real bad biggie in this country. The level of legroom legally that has been given to American citizens has created in them a boldness to do strange things to people in countries that have not seen that kind of strangeness. And so they're freaking shocking all of us with how insensitive, inhumane, full of exploitation they are, and also just like violent. The level of violence is just a shocker that slaps you when you're dealing with an American. They're entitled, they're used to getting away with murder, and upon getting away with this murder, then expect us to just take stuff lying down, especially because all throughout the decades, they have been getting spoiled whenever they commit strange atrocities. Because a prophet has no honor in his own hometown, or people have no honor in their own neighborhood. And so because people have no honor in their own neighborhoods, they tend to get ignored when they cry on the rooftops in their own neighborhoods against injustice. And so with them being ignored, they then get away. They've been positively reinforced to carry on acting a fool everywhere across the world. Because everywhere across the world, especially in poverty-stricken nations or nations that are struggling with a lot of socio-economic issues, social-political issues, civil war, they just don't have time to be focusing on a woman crying because some cyber stalker is all up in her grill. So Karawa is ignored. And so an American man that's used to purge laws, setting him free from prison when he's supposed to stay there for the rest of his life, is then also dealing with a country that could not care less that a woman is struggling at the hands of some dude in America. That is what's going on. So this here is a twofold issue. It's the fact that all throughout the ages, Americans have been getting away with murder in all of our countries because all of our countries have been ignoring the people on the ground crying anyway. Lots and lots of disregard for sorrow on the ground. Only look at what happens in this country when there is a flood in neighborhoods where people are living in shacks and they are displaced. How after the story gets covered in the news, these people gotta find a way to build new shacks elsewhere. The government not intervening to help them along or do anything. And the country forgetting about what's going on with them. And so because the country has forgotten what's going on with them, these men, women, and children have just got to find a way to make this work. So you got to cross your finger in South Africa that you don't find yourself in a flood zone, because after it makes its way into ENCA, after it makes its way into SABC News, it's over for you. You're on your own. Women in this country are always lamenting about violence against them. We've got an epidemic of gender-based violence. But after the story of one woman who has died has been covered, all the others that are crying about abuse on the rooftops just get ignored. In your own country, no matter how glorious you are, no matter what it is that you have to offer, people there unfortunately tend to ignore you, especially if you're complaining. Human beings are very unfortunately inclined, naturally in them for whatever reason, to disregard those who are already disregarded, people who are already suffering, people who are already struggling, who are poor. Unheard. People get irritated when a beggar walks towards their door or walks towards their window when they're driving in traffic. They, pull up their window so that this person does not be like, ma'am, hear the voice. And even when you say I don't have money, you don't even look them in the eye. A person with a real plight, a real struggle, is very largely ignored in their own land. The only people that feel some kind of way about the sorrow of this person are those looking from far away into that ecosystem. So we see the trauma in people suffering very much on the news, but in their own environment, it's just business as usual. That's the unfortunate thing about countrymen. So when a person makes an observation in your own country, nobody's even listening to you. Well, of course, if they're full of exploitation, because they have been made absolutely corrupt by absolute power, and they've also been made corrupt by a reward system for criminality, where they stay. They have had behavior trained them operantly. They've been positively reinforced. They've been rewarded for misdemeanors. They've been rewarded for criminality. So behavior has been entrenched in them to expect reward, instead of punishment for things that ought to get punishment. And so they walk into an ecosystem and they just take what they want and run with it and trust that people in that land are not going to do anything about it. And that's been I would go so far as to say 30-year-long growing, metastasizing cancer of American citizens. They have come to our countries, they have looked at our countries and salivated after the glory of what's in them, felt entitled to it, made an observation of the disregard of suffering by countrymen over their own countrymen. And then over the years, their nation has become a purge state. that has allowed them to be criminals, giving them more leg room in their corsets. And so that character in them of just expecting to walk into a Walmart and take $800 groceries and not face prison time, walking out without paying. When a nation has set you free, even though you still had to serve another 20 years of prison time, and it's not a proper parole hearing that makes sense because you were in good behavior or whatever, but it is rather a sickness came on the earth, and so we gotta clear the prisons. We gotta socially distance prisoners and keep only hardened ones in there. Like proper, they might as well have set all prisoners free in America except for those that are in maximum security. In 2023 in California, they might as well have done that in California in 2020, 2019. They might as well have done that, like proper. Some prisons should be completely empty based on that policy. So I don't even know what helped them make that decision, how they were able to reach a conclusion. Because there are prisons that are there for just, a certain layer of prisoner. Where, a bit of a Hannibal Lecter goes to the most hard knock, isolated, secluded prisons because he was so hard knock. But everybody else gets to go to a nice little medium security prison. All medium security and low security, whatever, prisons in the US should have just yawned their doors and let these guys flat out. I don't know what criteria they use, I really don't. But nonetheless, that particular behavioral flaw caused an entrenching, do you understand, of a particular moral insufficiency over and above an observation of glory in an ecosystem where it is ignored, and then pouncing on a person in that country and priding yourself in the fact that no one's coming for her. And that's what America is doing to a lot of Africans using their social media platforms. I have cried on the rooftops that why have you shadow banned me? Why do I not have freedoms of religions to speak? Why am I not able to do what I need to do? You have just ubiquitously made an unconstitutional decision to disregard my human right to freedom of speech and to earn a living, to escape the grain of poverty. Disregarded that. And then when I lament that there is a man in your land that is torturing me with witchcraft because he is a typical American, they then ignore me. And it is expected that this is going to continue to be a thing indefinitely when so many other people have experienced what I've experienced, and this thing has been going on for decades. So it's at the end of itself. I told you I'm more like a child that was born to a slave mom and dad about 13 years before the abolition of slavery. I might have experienced oppression, I might have experienced child labor, but I was at the very end of it. I was brought into this world at the tail end of it, so unfortunately I have to be a struggle hero, but nonetheless not one that has that laid the first foundations. I am not starting this war, I'm ending it. I am among the people ending it. The US is at the end of itself. It's over for America unless they do a better thing, and they are going to. So this woman that was my mom's boss, that was when I was 19. Guys, I'm 39, 20 years later. It was from the time when I was about 16 to 19 to 19 to 20. Do you know what that woman caused my mother to finally ultimately experience? So much poverty that she had to leave the suburbs, live in a back room at the back of her sister's house with a newborn baby, my little sister, sleeping with her in the bed and me on the floor in the same room at the back of my aunt's house when I used to have my own ensuite bedroom in the house one time. She caused my mom so much sorrow that she quit her job without another one, and we ended up in poverty.